Welcome back to the Indiana Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Maura Johnson. As the attorney shortage continues to impact communities across the state, leaders at Purdue University and Fort Wayne are developing ways to address legal needs right in their own backyard. In today's episode, I sat down with Georgia Wralstad Ulmschneider, an advisor for the campus's prelaw department, to learn more about how Purdue is supporting its students on the path to law school. During our conversation, you'll learn more about how PFW's prelaw department supports its students through mentorships and internships, the importance of developing strong intellectual architecture apart from law classes, and why Indiana is such a rich state to practice law in right now. But before we get into the episode, let's hear from our sponsor, Taft.
Taft, today's modern law firm. At Taft, we cultivate a highly respectful, transparent workplace that fosters creativity, teamwork, inclusion, and diversity. We couple our culture with a client-first approach, rewarding lawyers who understand their clients' goals and work to deliver success. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mara. It's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here. It's wonderful to be invited. And I know on behalf of Purdue Fort Wayne, we're just excited to be able to talk to you about everything related to campus pre-law advising, pre-law, what we're doing here, all of that. So I'm really thrilled to be here.
Good. I love it. Thank you. Just to start off, can you tell me more about, Purdue Fort Wayne's pre-law department and kind of your role as advisor, what that looks like for you?
Okay, I'm actually a faculty member in the Department of Political Science.
Yeah.
I built the campus pre-law advising almost from the ground up quite a while ago, and it's expanded over time. What first I built, I wanted it to be both advising itself, to be both comprehensive and personal. And so I'm really the only advisor in terms of meeting with students from the time they enter the campus to the time they go to law school. They see me. So I get to know them very, very well. I also act as the pre-law advisor for anyone in the community that is linked to PFW or not linked to PFW. I've even had students that are from Fort Wayne but have gone to the main campuses in Indiana or Purdue that have heard about me. So they have come back here for advice from me, which I'm comfortable with as well.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing I do. I meet with them. I talk to students about whatever major they're in because, law is so versatile. And that means a pre-law major doesn't really have to be any particular discipline. I know everyone knows that. But I do ensure that our students take the kind of 5 or 6 subject areas that traditionally the ABA has said is really a very good idea to take. It's not a course. Rather, it would be good to have something in history, good to have something in finance, etc., to make them well-rounded. I think it's also because lots of different disciplines study the same material. They ask different questions and they have different intellectual architectures. And knowing how to think logically in all these different intellectual architectures makes for a better pre-law student and makes for a better attorney.
Yeah.
So I do that. In addition to that, I help prepare them for the LSAT, give them ideas of good study approaches, the manuals that seem to be working this year. I'm very kind of data-driven on that, look at the nationwide trends, what people are saying works. I have a tutor they can go to as well, that kind of thing. I help them with their personal statements, their optional essays, their selection of law schools. I suggest to them various, campus activities or other activities that I think will broaden them a little bit, whether it is we have a class that does a mock trial. We have a class that does a mock Federal Reserve, which is really good for people that want to go maybe into corporate work, governmental work, dealing with regulation, etc. And also, and I'm sure we might speak about this later, internships shadowing, things like that. And then finally, of course, I stay with them as they get out. I can't tell you the number of students that call me after they're in law school. Professor Ulmschneider, could you help me? Is this a good summer associate position? Or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I do that as well. And they stay with me. And I would love that because the last thing I do with all my students is they're starting to go through the process and explore schools, what school would be good for them in terms of law or the area of law. I match them up with, I guess I'll call them, they may be an in-person buddy or they may be an email buddy, but there's someone who is from PFW that has gone through the law school process at all the schools the students are applying to. And so that they can talk to that person about the climate of the school, what it was like, the pros and cons, and that person remains a mentor with them through the rest of the process and into law school itself. And so that's a very nice feature too. So that's that. That's what I do.
Yeah.
A lot of different things.
I love that. And I love the emphasis on that mentorship aspect, which I think is huge.
I think it's so important.
Yeah.
I just linked a student of mine who's interested in international law with one of my very first people that graduated from law school, who's now third in the partnership of an international firm in Washington, D.C. And so Don, who's in his 50s, and Bobby, who's in his 20s, are talking, and Dawn's mentoring him about international law and what would be good besides which law schools, what to do. And I just love that. I just love that. It makes me feel so happy about how, I guess, our students are helping each other, bridging the gap, doing all these things. I think it's a real community.
I love your passion for it. It's clearly such a heart mission for you. But you had said that you had started this. You started it.
Yes.
What was the motivation behind that? Were you seeing something that there was like a need for? What was that like?
It wasn't long after I came to the university. And I came to the university, I think, fairly young. I was in my mid-20s when I came and came into the political science department. And there was an individual already there that was doing some pre-law advising, but it didn't have an architecture to it. It didn't have anything. And he went on a scholarly Fulbright. And the then provost of the university asked my then chair, could Georgia fill in? And I did. And whatever I did for those 2 years, the provost of the university essentially told my chair, she keeps going. She keeps going. You know what I mean? She keeps going. So that's how it happened.
Yeah.
And so I've just continued with it through quite a few provosts and actually quite a few chancellors.
Yeah.
And I've retired actually 3 years ago. And the current chancellor, Ron Elsenbaumer, and the current provost, Carl Drummond, asked me to come back if I was willing to not only reinvigorate it. It wasn't uninvigorated, but really bring the punch back and take it to the next level. Yeah. And so I don't think if I didn't love what I do so much and I wasn't given the kind of reign I'm given and respected for what I do, that I wouldn't have said yes. But Chancellor Elsenbaumer and Vice Chancellor Drummond said, go with it, fly, Georgia, fly. And when I have that kind of freedom,
absolutely,
I'm more than happy to do it.
Definitely. Well, and something else that you had mentioned a couple minutes ago was this idea, and I was reading up about it as well on your website, but the emphasis on, law schools aren't necessarily looking for pre-law major students when they're entering, law school. So I'm just kind of curious, how do you foster that pursuit of pre-law while also encouraging them to go with a major that will really service them in and out of law, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think from the very beginning, when I start talking to students when they're still in new student orientation, I talk to students in high schools in a variety of settings. And from the very, very beginning, and their parents, I talk to them about the education of law and why one needs, as I said, this broad intellectual architecture in terms of, writing and, of course, communicating, but really logic and analytic abilities. And so with that, you don't want to just take courses about law. That's what law schools do. And I also point out, and I think this works very well, people really respond to empirical data. And so the law school admissions council follows the various majors across the country and how those majors do in terms of acceptance to law school on a yearly basis. And if you will look at that, all you have to do is show data. Real data. And again, it says that the acceptance rate for a pre-law major is in the mid-50s, where the acceptance rates nationwide for everything from economics to my field to political science to English to engineering are in the high 70s or low 80s.
Wow.
So that speaks volumes. That really supports me. You know what I mean? And it goes a long way to explaining why pick something you love. And then I will help you get those other subject areas the ABA wants to see.
Yeah.
And you will be so well equipped for law school. It shows up in how well our students do on the LSAT. It shows up on where they go to law school and how well they do in law school. And that's the other thing I try to talk about. That also settles the nerves that we don't have a pre-law major, so I think it works pretty well.
Yeah. I was going to say, I feel like I see a lot of people, even media majors, that end up switching into the law path, which I think is really interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the fields, of course, communication, that is vital. And one of the things that I make sure, that our pre-law students, not a major, have access to. It's also why I like the extracurricular activities that I suggest, like Model U and other things that forces one to speak and talk and articulate a little bit their ideas. Absolutely, I agree with that.
So switching gears a little bit, I want to kind of look at this emphasis that Purdue Fort Wayne puts on helping the communities and the legal communities surrounding the campus. So I guess what does the legal landscape maybe look like in the areas surrounding Purdue?
Okay. For quite a while, in general, the legal landscape, because I have many, many students of mine come back to the Fort Wayne or greater area, and many that don't. We have had students go to 71 different law schools, all the Indiana law schools, Yale, Harvard, Berkeley acceptances, all over. You know what I mean? But in terms of when they come back or this legal landscape, I can say in the Fort Wayne community itself, for the past several years, what I've heard is from firms, whether they're large firms, small firms, etc., we're having trouble recruiting. We're having trouble getting back, having people come into Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
And when it goes to the surrounding area, the rural communities and the smaller towns and the small town firms, that's like on steroids. I hear that. And it kind of mirrors what the commission found, the Supreme Court Commission did in terms of what we look like as a state in terms of lawyers per capita. I believe, what is it, like 2 lawyers per 1,000 people in Indiana. So clearly what that concern about recruitment is reflecting not only having students come to our area, it's just having law students, period. You know what I mean? For sure. I think there's a lot of reason for recruitment difficulties. And I know what's been said about it in terms of, big markets, et cetera. I mean, some of it clearly, students think, oh, I want to go to Indianapolis or Chicago, or they're interested in big law or something, or they may be interested in an area which they're not sure is even serviced in the Fort Wayne. I understand that, and that can happen sometimes. Clearly, that can happen sometimes.
Yeah.
And I know there's a discussion about there's only 3 law schools. Now, we're in Northeast Indiana, so I don't want to say I disagree with it. I quibble with the only 3 law schools a little bit, because clearly we have closer to us, Michigan State is about the same distance as IU McKinney is. Ohio Northern is within 45 minutes. So there are some other very close places. What I have found in the Fort Wayne markets that I think is also affecting the fact that we don't have the Indiana schools close in, Michigan State's pretty far away. So there's just Ohio Northern. Is the difference is in Northwest, in Central, and in Southern Indiana, it's the placement of the schools. So that what happens is the students there have clinicals their first and second years. And so they get to see, this firm or that firm. And it makes it easier for those firms to recruit, because those students see in those areas, in addition to Indy being Indy, things like that. And the other thing that I found out is really interesting. I've even found it in the Indy area, is that when students are coming back from schools or they write letters and they're interested from schools like Virginia or Yale, there is this, I think, almost a self-esteem problem with firms in Indiana, even in Indianapolis, that think, oh my God, yeah, if we bring this person from Yale or Virginia or Berkeley, they really are not going to stay here. They just want an associate job for 3 years and they're going to move on. That is a mistake. That is a mistake. I know that personally from some of my students that have come back. And so that's something that I think we as a community, I need to get across on the other side to the legal community. That's a mistake. It's also why it's so important to me to have those internships, because they become the substitute for not having the clinicals, because we don't have a law school.
Right.
So they become ways to build future attorneys, recruiting tools. That's how we can play in the field as well. And that's what I'm going for in terms of recruitment, not only from the students' part, but to help our legal communities in Fort Wayne and out of Fort Wayne. So it's more than just, the number of schools and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and can you talk to me about those recruitment efforts and how you bridge that gap to encourage these firms that, yes, these students, want to be here, and make it clear that, these students they're willing to stay. They're wanting to work in these Indiana firms.
I think for several reasons. One, I've been here for 10 minutes, a lot more than 10 minutes. So over time, I have a number of students in a lot of firms.
Yeah.
And because of that, some of the students that I've had a while ago are now in positions that might be on recruiting committees and stuff. So then when they see an application come in from a student whose undergraduate is PFW and may have gone to Virginia, they're not flinching as much.
Yeah.
I may even get a call. Georgia, okay, I see this student. Can you tell me, are they thinking about coming back permanently? Because they know I'll tell them the truth. Okay, that's a very simple thing. The other thing I do and have done is PFW has had, and is growing so much, a wonderful partnership with the Allen County Bar Association and the Allen County Bar Foundation. I actually sit on the Bar Foundation's board. And we are right now in the process of formalizing now developing a big internship network among those firms and sole practitioners
Yeah.
that are with the Allen County Bar Association. And, we're going to have the firm up with their internships. Students can click on it. It's going to be wonderful. We've had those internships before, but I wanted to take it to the next level so that it's more accessible for students. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be the bar is going to be having an event in which I come and explain to attorneys in the area just how important this is, not only for the students, but for them, for recruitment. And again, I said I follow national data. What you're starting to see is a lot of big national firms are now having undergraduate internships for precisely the reason we're talking about.
Yeah.
Also, I just started this 2 days ago. I'm now, I guess, leveraging my network of students that are in the more rural communities where there isn't a bar association.
Yeah.
But this student works at a law firm that is for its size, really a big networker. And so I'm in the process of having a rural and small town agreement with a network of law firms in the rural areas of Northeast Indiana for internships too, to really do that same thing. I think it's going to work really well.
Yeah.
They're very excited, the people that I've talked to, because they don't feel forgotten. Sometimes those small towns feel forgotten by the bigger city's bar or the bigger city's school, right? That's going to be rolling out next.
Okay.
So,
I love that. There is such an emphasis on, servicing those rural legal communities because obviously it can get very difficult to get those lawyers out there.
Yeah. And even if you're coming from Fort Wayne out and you have a secondary office, that might be fine. And that's good. And it's a way, but you want to be there for more than a half a day once a month. And so by having these internships in these small towns and rural areas where the students are there and can see the cool and wonderful things they can do there and how they can build relationships.
Yeah.
I think that will really help. The other thing I want to do is I'm going out. I want to go much more to rural high schools where a lot of students have never had maybe been around a lawyer, seen a lawyer, have ideas about a lawyer, and they can talk to me and see me in person. And then we can make those early connections. And so that's on my agenda next year as well.
Absolutely.
That's coming in the fall.
I love that. Yeah. I love the efforts behind getting those high schoolers exposed to it because it does. I mean, whether you choose to go to law school or not, I do think, as a high schooler, I didn't know a lot about the law. I didn't know anything until my brother was going to law school, and that was my only exposure.
Yeah, and PFW wants to be that resource, you know what I mean, to go out there. Obviously, we'd really like them to come to PFW too because we think we're pretty good, but it's also those community connections are very important for us.
Yeah.
We're just not a university for Fort Wayne. We serve a larger area in Northeast Indiana and even beyond, and it's very important that I'm out there. That we're out there, so they know it. Yeah.
Well, and I know that I think we touched on this briefly, but I like this idea that a lot of the students that are on this pre-law track are also from these rural communities, and it's this mindset of giving back to their communities. How do you, support these students who are from these rural communities and are interested in taking that law school experience and then coming back to their small town or small?
Absolutely. Well, there's several things. Obviously, about that there are actual efforts at McKinney, for example, is one of having these placements in rural communities, etc. But for me, when my students that are going on to law school and thinking about coming back in the area.
Yep.
Even students that are not from rural communities. And again, I have not yet developed this formal internship program, but I have an informal one cooking already.
Yeah.
What I will do is I'll very often suggest, because first year associateships are a little bit harder to get. It's the perfect time for me to say to students, hey, now I know you were thinking of Fort Wayne. Avila's not that far, or Columbia City's not that far, or Auburn's not that far. And there's a firm that would really like to have you. And often because those firms are smaller, in a way, their mentorship on that first year is a closer, tighter mentorship. So it can be a win-win for both. I talk to students about that. And I will often have students willing to take me up on that.
Yeah.
And so once they take me up on that, then, and maybe they'll come back to Fort Wayne, but they may be the student that is also willing to go to the practice, in that practice is willing to go to that community that has a secondary office. They're that student, they're that person because they've been in that community, or maybe they will go back and practice in Auburn or LaGrange, etc. And that's happened as well. So it's just a little trick of the trade to try to get them to see, hey, there's life out there and it's cool. I get to do a lot of things, and it gets them to see a lot of different kinds of law in terms of practicing when you're in a smaller community as well.
Yeah. I feel like, for lack of a better term, it makes me think you're almost like a matchmaker in the legal community, because you're really, partnering these two parties to find their perfect match. And I love that.
It's not the perfect match. I certainly want both parties to have a good experience.
Yeah.
Will it always be the perfect experience? Will the student always want to come back to that firm or that locality? Not. But I always want that student to come back with a feeling of, yes, that was a good experiential learning opportunity. And they'll remember it both in their heart and their head as a good experience. And for the firms, I want them to have that, not only because of that student, but for all my students to come, so that they're willing to take a risk on another student, Yeah.
Bouncing off of something we talked about earlier, when it comes to, the legal needs in the surrounding Fort Wayne areas, is there any part of kind of the law itself, like areas of practice that you're seeing and supporting students in pursuing?
That is a wonderful question. And I would say in the smaller communities and rural areas, one of the things also that I think has been lost in not only in law, but in the medical field and the other traditional professions is, for lack of a better word, I'm going to suggest a general practitioner, whether it is a doctor or whether it is a lawyer in that sense. And certainly in rural communities, there's a need for a person that is able to handle quite a variety of legal needs, everything from obviously family law, hopefully it's more adoption than divorce, to contract situations, buying and selling, things like that, land, etc., to estate work, to a range of things, to tort actions. So to have that good, solid foundation, I think is really, really important in small towns and rural communities in that area. On the other hand, I don't want to dismiss, and I think it's dismissed too easily, that, that as manufacturing reasserts itself in rural communities, as, there's growth of businesses larger than small a little bit, it's certainly not the corporate practice that you're going to have at Eli Lilly, but an individual that is in effect very good at business law. And one might need to have, even in a small firm, a specialist that can deal with everything from, incorporation to selling a business to a larger entity to arranging all kinds of things. I think that's important as well. So, one can't diss that smaller communities also need specialists. and they shouldn't have to always drive to get them. You know what I mean? Joe says larger communities who have a lot of specialists in the Fort Wayne area, a really good general practitioner, I'm starting to worry about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm starting to worry about.
Yeah.
As people think they need to specialize.
Right.
So it's almost the same thing. It seems like it would be different, but in a way, I think that needs them both.
Well, and I think something also that it comes down to is whether small community, large, the people you're representing, they want ultimately someone who truly knows the community very well. And obviously you can, that it's a learned practice in commuting, but also a lot of it comes from living in that community and being with those people and understanding the way of life there and how they function.
And even as 100%, 110%, because much of the practice of law is an art as much as it is legal science. It is a connection and a human relationship. I remember when I went to law school, I love this and I always remember it because people think of law as something that's always contentious and conflict. And I remember one of my first professors said, what you really want to do is practice preventative law so that everybody's clear in the contract what's expected. So there aren't any arguments. So everybody knows in their will and their trust and their estate what's going to happen. So families aren't rendered asunder and things like that. And I love that part, and to remember that part and to have people trust you and to get to know you and to try to do that. And of course, you're going to represent them if there's a conflict and be their spokesperson. But it's that wider idea of having faith and trust and human connection. And that should be whether you're in New York or in Fort Wayne. You know what I mean? That you need to get to know your client. You don't just walk in, fill out a little form. And to me, that's really not the practice of a profession.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So for, a lot of our listeners are obviously attorneys, and for those who may be in the Fort Wayne community or not and are just now hearing about PFW's mission for pre-law, how can they involved if they want to with mentorship or kind of reaching out with recruitment? How do you recommend they kind of go about that?
Certainly, if they see my name and face on the events at the bar or others, please come to the event if it's related to pre-law recruitment, etc., and meet the students that are there at that event, or come up to me afterwards, etc. And also, I want to be exhausted from the number of people, the number of attorneys that are calling me saying, I want in. I want one of your people to intern for me. Or if they can't do that because it's too hard right now and it does take some effort, I want to be a mentor, even an email mentor, or come have the student shadow me for a week. That, even if it's not an internship, builds a relationship that'll build in the future. So call me on the phone, email me, exhaust me with all inundate. And also, I'm hoping that I will very often want to have attorneys from all kinds of fields come to the pre-law club at the university, and those students want to have different attorneys talk about what to do when those students call, because it's on them to do the calling. Answer their call.
Yeah.
Answer their call. Those are the kind of things they can do. And, just even if you don't hear me or hear me a little bit, that human connection, even take someone out for a coffee, talk to them a little bit. If they, oh my God, I can't do an internship, be another one of my email buddies. That doesn't take so much time. You don't have to have gone to PFW. You could still be in the PFW family, and do that. That's what I would say.
Perfect. I love that. Is there anything you wanted to discuss or share that I didn't ask about?
I guess what I would say is this, that for attorneys that are listening or others that are listening, and they're thinking about, oh my God, what is the state of Indiana? And am I going to get help? And okay, so the Supreme Court, had this commission, but what in real life is our courts doing, etc., even at the very top? I found out that Chief Justice Rush was coming to the Allen County Bar Association for an event to talk about the future of law in Indiana and, her vision and how she, as well as all of us, can help build this larger, greater community. And I saw that. And of course, you can probably tell I am not a wallflower. So I called the executive director and asked if a certain number of seats, because it's limited, could be saved for some of my pre-law students. He answered yes. Then I found out there was a social hour for attorneys beforehand with Chief Justice Rush. And I said, could they be at the social hour? He said yes. And I thought, attorneys are going to be, my students are going to be sheepish. They're not going to get in. And I know because one of my former recent students who graduated first in his class from Mauer, then clerked before the Indiana Supreme Court, and not Chief Justice Rush, another person. But Ben said, the court's very interested in, meeting with younger people and really getting going. So I knew that. So I then said to the executive director, I have another question instead. Say my students come, would she meet just with them? It would mean so much. And the answer I got back was yes. And Luke said, okay, maybe for 10 minutes she would. Oh, no. She's staying for at least a half an hour to meet with our students. Wow. And that is signaling for anybody that wants to know, does our court and the leadership of our court care about recruitment in the future? I just did this. It took her an afternoon to answer. And that's one little example. But I guess I would say that to everybody's listening. Be heartened. Join the community, be involved. If Justice Rush is going to wait to go back to meet with our students, certainly you could do that, something too. I guess that's what I'd say. Yeah,
I love that. Well, yeah, and it's very encouraging to see for all of, the woes and the issues that a lot of times the legal community faces. It is a very strong legal community here in Indiana that is very dedicated to maintaining that integrity and building that integrity.
Absolutely. I didn't come back to PFW to not make a difference. Mm-hmm. I didn't come out of retirement to watch it fade. I'm an optimist. I don't know if you can tell. I'm a glass half full girl. And I think that's what Indiana is, a glass half full state.
Yeah.
And we need to remember that about ourselves. Definitely. And the legal community for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I loved this conversation.
Oh.
I loved the information you provided. And
thank you, Laura.
Thank you for listening to the Indiana Lawyer Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Purdue Fort Wayne's pre-law department, we'll have more information on that in the description of this episode. For what's happening around the legal community in Indiana, please visit our website at theindianalawyer.com. You can also follow us on social media.